Okay, okay. Hello, Dumelang. Hello, how are you? Sanman, Salam Alaikum. Welcome back. Like I said, we are so back. This lesson is gonna be about like mechanics, right? The introduction of mechanics, like the introduction of vehicle dynamics. So I'm just gonna be introducing vehicle dynamics in a couple of tips, before we dive right into questions, like examples, right? So yeah, first thing about mechanics, we all know that we're talking about like the movement of a car, right? We're talking about the movement of a car. Now, I want to give out like important tips, the ones that you're supposed to remember, right? So, this is vehicle dynamics, right? Vehicle dynamics, right? Okay. One thing about vehicle dynamics, right? Okay, is a car. Okay, basically, we're talking about a car, right? Okay, there's a car, right? There's a car, right? And this car of ours has an engine, right? There's the engine here, right? And in vehicle dynamics, there's three things, right? So we're talking about one, we're talking about torque, right? And then two, we're talking about speed, right? Speed, and then number three, we're talking about power, right? So this torque and this speed and this power, right? Like it can be either a power, it can be either the torque of the engine or the torque of the wheel. Like everything comes from the engine, right? The movement comes from the engine, but then the torque of the engine is not the same as the torque of the wheel, and also the speed of the engine is not the same as the speed of the wheel, and the power of the engine is also not the same as the power of the wheel, right? So that is why we have, like in vehicle dynamics, we have two things. We have the torque of the engine and the torque of the wheel, right? We have the speed of the engine and the speed of the wheel, right? We have the power of the engine and we have the power of the wheel, right? So like there's two. You have to know there's two when you're given. Like when you're given, you have to know that which one am I given, right? And I think everybody knows this formula, right? Like power, right? Power is equals to 2 pi speed multiplied by torque, right, over 60, right? So this this formula, that means you know that if you finding the power of the engine is like this way, the power of the engine, you have to include everything of the engine. You can't say the power of the engine is equals to 2 pi and then the speed of the wheel multiplied by the torque of the engine. So it's kind of complicated. Like you have to put everything. I hope you understand me. If I'm finding the power of the engine, this is gonna be 2 pi the speed of the engine, right? And the torque of the engine over 60, right? And then if I'm finding the power of the wheel, this is gonna be 2 pi the speed of the wheel, right? The torque of the wheel, right? Over 60. So make sure, like, be aware of these things, right? Be aware of these things. Okay, I'm moving on. I hope you get me. That is tip number one, something that you're supposed to know, right? Okay. Number two. Here I'm gonna write like a couple of okay. One thing about vehicle dynamics, right? Vehicle dynamics. Everything, like every question, it always comes back to this formula. F is equals to ma, right? Now this formula can be written in two ways, right? The car can either be moving like at a horizontal pace, right? Like at the horizontal line, right? or it can either be moving at an incline. Yeah, look at my cars. This is a car, right? And this is my car, right? So like I said, every vehicle dynamics question comes back to this formula. So here, if it's moving at a horizontal, like a normal the horizontal line, right? You have your force effective, which is the force that is pulling this that is driving this car, and you have your frictional force, which is Fr, right? And then here is different. You have three forces. You have here your force effective, right? And then you have your frictional force, right? And then you have another force, which is the weight sine theta, which is this way. Also is in the same direction as the frictional force. Here it is mg sine theta, right? If you want to know where it came from, it's like the weight, because it's perpendicular to the surface, and then it goes like this, and then the resultant. So this is the weight, and then this is the resultant, right? So, like I said, this formula can either be written this way or this way. If it's moving in a horizontal, like in a one, this formula that I'm about to write here is for this one, right? It's gonna be F EFF minus frictional force is equals to MA. Simple. I feel like I'm doing something basic here, right? Number two, this is for the incline one, right? It's gonna be F EFF minus FR minus mg sine theta is equals to MA. This is basic. You can I feel like most of you, I know that maybe you know all these things, but then I'm just doing this for those who don't know yet, right? So that we can move at the same pace, right? Okay, like I said, every vehicle dynamics question comes back to this formula. Either F EFF minus FR is equals to MA, or F EFF minus FR is equals to mg sine theta. Okay, now talking about these same equations. Okay, talking about these same equations, these two important equations, talking about them, right? Most of the time in your questions, you are given the frictional force most of the time, right? And then you're supposed to find what? The force effective. This is what gives a lot of people problems, right? You're supposed to find the force effective. Now, here's a formula to find the force effective, like the effective force, is equals to the torque of the wheel. Be aware, the torque of the wheel, right, over the radius of the wheel, right? Okay, I'm gonna write them down like in an order so that you know how to find it and how to find it, right? The formula starts here, right? And then you have an unknown. Let me say your unknown is the force effective, right? Then you know that how to find the force effective, you find it with this formula, right? Then you come to number two, finding your force effective, you need the torque of the wheel and the radius of the wheel, right? This most of the time you are given, right? And then they say, so you see that you have to find the torque of the wheel. The torque of the wheel is the torque of the engine, right? Multiplied by the ratio, multiplied by the efficiency, right? And then all minus by moment of inertia multiplied by R. Like I'm writing them in order, right? So you know the formula starts here. So to find this one, I use this equation. But then this equation has this one. So to find this one, I use this equation, right? Okay. Number three, right? Number three. This is the moment of inertia. You know, I is equals to like mass, like the rotating mass, multiplied by the radius of gyration squared, right? And then 4r, like r is equals to acceleration over the radius of the wheel, right? So I feel like I'm writing all the formulas you need to know, right? Like the important ones, right? Okay, okay. And then what else? What else? This is the torque of the engine. This is the ratio. This is the efficiency, right? Okay. Number five, another thing, this is some formula that you're supposed to know. I think like they're basic from grade 12. You know that what's velocity? Velocity is equals to distance over time, right? And then number six, what is acceleration? Acceleration is equal to velocity over time, right? And then, yeah, yeah. This I feel like these are the most important ones you shouldn't forget, right? Okay. Now another thing, uh, another thing that you shouldn't forget, right? You shouldn't forget. Here is it. Don't worry. At the end, I'm gonna summarize everything in order for you to grab them, right? I'm sorry. I apologize for the noise. Mashallah. Okay. Another thing that you're supposed to know here in my first paper, I said you can either be given like this torque, there are two different torque, the torque of the engine and the torque of the wheel, and the speed of the engine and the speed of the wheel, the power of the engine and the power of the wheel. So how do we convert from the torque of the engine to the torque of the wheel, right? Is this formula. We use this formula, okay? From this is torque, uh, right? The torque from the torque of the engine to the torque of the wheel. Torque of the wheel is equal to torque of the engine. This is the same formula that I've written here. Multiplied by ratio, multiplied by efficiency, right? Minus moment of inertia multiplied by R. This moment of inertia, you include it if you give it, right? Okay. Number two, the speed, right? Speed, which is in RPM, right? This is in Newton meter, right? And this is in RPM, revolutions per minute, right? From the speed of the engine to the speed of the wheel, like the speed of the wheel is equals to the speed of the engine over the ratio, right? Okay, the speed of the wheel is equal to the speed of the engine over the ratio, right? And then number three, the power which is in watts, right? So from the power of the engine to the power of the wheel, right? Power of the wheel is equals to power of the engine multiplied by the efficiency. Okay, yes, good. Okay. And then another thing, don't forget here, the force effective, we don't use the torque of the engine, we use the torque of the wheel. So if you're given the torque of the engine, you just plug it here first to find the torque of the wheel, and then you plug him here to find the force effective, right? Okay, okay. And then what else? But then, like I said, everything comes back to this formula, to one or two, right? So you find the force effective and then minus the friction force is equals to MA. And another thing, number four, right? When they say something like the speed is constant, constant, constant speed, right? Means acceleration is equals to zero, right? So if they give you a question and they say blah blah blah, a car is moving blah 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 at the constant speed of 16 meters, you know that this acceleration you're gonna put zero here. Okay, but then I think you're gonna get it as we go through the problems, right? And I feel like the more we do these problems, there's some tips that I'm gonna give you guys, in order for you guys to remember. But then vehicle dynamics is not confusing. You just have to know that everything comes back here. You just have to be able to find the force effective and be attentive when you're reading a question, right? Like be cautious because they try they try to manipulate some of you guys, and you end up writing the wrong things, right? So be cautious when you're writing this question. Read it, like, if you can even read it 3 times, just to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Okay. Yeah. But then, like I said, everything comes back to this formula. Force effective multiply, force effective minus the frictional force is equals to MA. But then if it's on an incline, you include the mg, like the weight sine theta, right? Okay. And then how do I find the force effective? The force effective, I find it using the formula. Force effective is equal to the torque of the wheel over the radius of the wheel. Okay. And then what if I'm given the torque of the engine, not the torque of the wheel? I find the torque of the wheel with this formula. Like the torque of the engine, the torque of the wheel is equal to the torque of the engine multiplied by the ratio multiplied by the efficiency minus the moment of inertia multiplied by R. And if you're not given the moment of inertia, right, you just put 0. That means you put 0 here, right? And then here is how to find the moment of inertia if you're given the mass and the radius of gyration. This mass is the mass of the rotating part. This is the mass, okay, mass of rotating part. This mass is the mass of the rotating parts, and this is not the radius of the wheel, it's the radius of gyration, right? Okay. And then this, that R is equal to acceleration over the radius of the wheel, and this velocity is equal to distance over time, and then acceleration is equal to velocity over time. Okay. But then, like I said, be attentive what you are given. Like, be sure, like, check everything. If you're given something, don't just write without, like, knowing why you're supposed to write it that way, right? So this is just a few tips before we start the questions of, like, vehicle dynamics. And then in the next video, we're just gonna be going through, like, the question that I have. I think Seb posted them, so yeah, I'm gonna be going through them all. So this is the first paper, second paper, and then third paper, and then the fourth paper. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out.